You sit down to eat, and they appear. They don't make a sound. They don't jump. They just position themselves at the edge of your space and fix their eyes on you with an intensity that feels almost rude, like being watched by someone who has decided you are the most important thing in the room. Most people have a name for this: begging, guilt-tripping, the look. They laugh about it, wave their dog away, maybe slip them a piece of something just to get those eyes off them. And then they wonder why the look gets worse every week. But here is the question worth actually asking. Why does an animal with a full food bowl, no physiological need for what is on your plate, and no language to explain itself, why does that animal station itself in front of you and watch every single bite? Because the answer that most people assume, hunger, manipulation, greed, is the least interesting part of what is actually happening. And once you understand the deeper layers behind that stare, you will never be able to look at it the same way again. To understand what your dog is doing at the dinner table, you have to go back much further than last Tuesday. You have to go back to when dogs were not yet dogs. Before domestication, before breeds, before names and collars and full food bowls, there were wolves. And wolves, like all pack animals, had a feeding hierarchy. The pack hunted together. The kill was made together. But who ate first and in what order was not random. It was structured. High-ranking animals ate first. Lower-ranking animals waited, watched, and positioned themselves to receive what was left. Watching a higher-ranking member eat was not just about waiting for scraps. It was a social signal. It communicated status, patience, membership. The animal that watched without aggression, that held position without challenge, was demonstrating something to the group. I belong here. I understand my place. I am part of this. When wolves became dogs and humans became their pack, that behavior transferred. When your dog sits and watches you eat, it is not inventing a strategy. It is running a program that is older than any breed, older than any training manual, older than the concept of a dinner table. It is performing a ritual of social belonging that their ancestors performed in the wild, directed now at the humans who became their world. But here is where the science revealed something that the evolutionary story alone cannot explain. Because what researchers discovered about the mechanics of that stare is genuinely extraordinary. In 2019, a team led by Dr. Julian Kaminski and Professor Bridget Waller at the University of Portsmouth published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that changed how scientists understand the facial anatomy of dogs. The researchers dissected the facial muscles of domestic dogs and gray wolves and compared them side by side. What they found was that the musculature of dogs and wolves is nearly identical across the face, with one specific exception. A small muscle around the inner eye, called the levator anguli oculi medialis, or LOM, is consistently present in domestic dogs. In wolves, it is essentially absent. In most wolf specimens, the researchers found only a scant cluster of fibers where the muscle would be, without the structure to function as dog's version does. This muscle is responsible for a very specific facial movement, lifting the inner corner of the eyebrow. The expression it produces, the raised inner brow, the slightly enlarged eye, the expression that looks to human observers something like sadness or vulnerability, is what people call puppy dog eyes, and it did not exist in dogs' wild ancestors. The researchers concluded that domestication over roughly 33,000 years shaped the facial anatomy of dogs specifically for communication with humans. Dogs that produced this expression more intensely were more likely to elicit care and attention from humans, giving them a survival advantage. Over generations, the muscle grew stronger, the expression became more pronounced, and the behavior became embedded. What you're looking at when your dog raises its eyebrows at your dinner table is not an accident. It is the physical product of thousands of years of your species and theirs shaping each other. That face was built, in part, by humans like you who responded to it. But the research goes further, because the same team discovered something even more precise. In a 2017 study, Kaminski and her colleagues measured how often dogs produced the inner brow raise expression under different conditions. What they found was striking. Dogs raised their inner eyebrows significantly more often when a human was actively looking at them than when the human was turned away or not paying attention. The expression changed based on whether they were being observed. In behavioral science, this is called an audience effect. It means the behavior is not purely reflexive, not just an automatic emotional leak. It is communicative. The dog raises its eyebrows more when you are watching precisely because the behavior is directed at you. It is a signal, not just a symptom. And when you consider what Miho Nagasawa and colleagues at Azabu University demonstrated in their landmark 2015 study published in the journal Science, that sustained mutual gaze between dogs and their owners triggers an increase in oxytocin in both species, the same neurochemical that drives bonding between human parents and their infants. The picture that emerges is something remarkable. Your dog, watching you eat, is not just waiting for food. It is deploying a facial expression that was shaped by evolution, specifically to trigger caregiving responses in humans. It is holding your gaze in a way that generates a measurable biochemical bonding response in both of you. It is performing a social ritual that communicates membership in your group. And it is doing all of this in the 10-second window between when you pick up your fork and when you take the next bite. There is a term in ethology for what researchers observe in dogs during this behavior: affiliative food begging. The word affiliative is the important one. It does not just mean hunger. It means social affiliation, connection, belonging, relationship. Research on canine social behavior shows that the stare at the dinner table functions not only as a food request, but as a social signal. I am here. I am with you. I am part of this circle. Now, there is one more thing worth knowing. Something behavioral scientists have observed that gives the stare at dinner a practical dimension most owners miss. The response you give to that stare matters more than most people realize. If the stare is consistently rewarded with food from your plate, your dog learns a behavioral loop: stare, receive, repeat. Over time, the behavior intensifies, the positioning gets closer, the eye contact gets more insistent. The dog is not being manipulative in the way humans mean when they use that word. They are doing exactly what learning theory predicts. A behavior that produces a reward gets stronger. But if the stare is acknowledged, with calm eye contact, with presence, with your voice, without the food reward following from your plate, something different happens. The dog learns that the social connection is available without the food contingency. The ritual can occur without the transaction. And for many dogs, that is actually the deeper need being expressed, not the chicken, the contact. Understanding this changes how you respond to it. A dog watching you eat from a relaxed body, tail softly moving, willing to disengage when redirected, that is a dog running the affiliative food begging program cleanly, seeking connection as much as calories. A dog that escalates, that paces, whines, nudges, cannot settle regardless of where you direct them. That animal may be expressing anxiety that mealtimes have come to trigger, a learned state that gets worse without structure. The difference in your response to those two dogs is the difference between reinforcing a bond and accidentally reinforcing a stress pattern. So the next time you sit down for a meal and look up to find that gaze waiting for you, patient, wide-eyed, steady, understand what is looking back at you. An animal that developed new anatomy over thousands of years, specifically to communicate with your species. An animal whose raised inner brow was shaped in part by the responses of people who came before you. People who could not resist that face and fed the dogs who made it best. An animal whose eye contact with yours right now is generating oxytocin in both of your bodies, pulling you closer in a chemical language that requires no words. They are not just watching you eat, they are asking to be part of something. The question is only whether you understand the language well enough to answer correctly. If this changed how you see that look at the dinner table, subscribe and leave a comment. Has your dog always done this? Or did it start after you accidentally gave them something from your plate?